Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar today, where the main idea is to present to you a wide variety of different educational scenarios that have been successfully launched by teachers from many different schools using the ChallengeMe platform. How is this going to unfold? First, I will give a brief presentation of the platform to explain a little bit about it. What are the use cases it addresses and how does it actually work on ChallengeMe? And then I will move on right after that. Then I'll go straight into these different examples of more advanced educational scenarios where we see that some teachers really take charge of the platform and create some truly interesting educational scenarios. And that was the idea behind this webinar, to be able to share them with you. They might interest you as well, since these are scenarios that can be implemented in various contexts. So I'm going to start with ChallengeMe for those who don't know us. So we are a solution for assessment and feedback. Originally, we were known for peer assessment, but now it's true that we can address many other use cases. We'll see that in just a moment. We are integrated with Moodle, Blackboard, Brightspace, and any other LMS that supports the LTI standard. And we work with business schools, engineering schools, and universities in France, Switzerland, Canada, and Belgium, mainly in France, of course, but we also work with other French-speaking countries. So that's ChallengeView, an assessment and feedback solution, really designed to promote learning. And we'll see in this slide that we have different formats that we can address. So just before we continue, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Gene, and at ChallengeView, I help teachers with using the platform. The idea isn't just to provide a tool, but also to support you and give you advice on the formats you can use. In terms of use cases that we can find, we can do deliverable assessment, meaning we ask students to submit their work and evaluate each other's work. Afterwards, the teacher can also evaluate the student's work. It can also be both, which we call co-evaluation, meaning evaluation by students and or by teachers. And so the idea here is to allow students to progress through evaluation. They will discover the work of others and will be able to give feedback on that work. They can put things into perspective compared to what they have done themselves and receive feedback from others. There will be presentation assessment where students evaluate each other's presentations. We will also have group member evaluation. So here, each student evaluates the members within their group. I'll go quickly because we'll see this in just a moment. Self-assessment, where students take a step back and reflect on what they have produced. Evaluation of the quality of feedback, either by students or by teachers. So recognizing those who have provided feedback, relevant ones, and then evaluation of the teaching to provide feedback to the teacher on the courses they've given. So if we take each use case one by one, we'll have the evaluation of deliverables with a small diagram to help understand how it works. So there's a student who submits and others who come to evaluate and provide feedback. This allows each student to receive different feedback on their work. It can be useful for preparing for an exam. It can help students discover what others are doing, see where they stand compared to the rest of the class, and check if they're not off topic with what they're producing. And afterwards, it can also be used to generate a grade. So if we consider that the students are mature enough to give themselves a consistent grade, we can include it as X% of the final grade. Afterwards, it depends on the group being addressed. We have the same thing with co-evaluation, as I mentioned earlier. A student submits their work and the others evaluate it, as does the teacher. This allows for a dual perspective, student and teacher. It's to cross perspectives and have different approaches in the feedback. We can also do oral presentation assessments. So it's true that with this format, what's interesting is that the students present, and then the other students evaluate those who are presenting and give feedback. The idea here is to keep the students' attention throughout the presentations and allow them to benefit from all the concepts being covered. It's true that one of the challenges of oral presentations is maintaining the students' attention. And so here we use evaluations and feedback to maintain that attention. It also helps to encourage class discussions. Some teachers use this format to provide a basis for feedback. So the students give feedback to those who are presenting, and then the teacher presents the feedback that was exchanged to ask whether you agree, disagree, why, and so on. So it provides a basis to spark discussions. Next, we have the evaluation of group members. So here, it's the students within a group who will evaluate each member of their group on behavioral skills. Generally, this can include things like group communication, taking initiative, ability to help others, quality of the work done, awareness of common goals. So there are banks of criteria that exist, which can save time and as a result, allow students to evaluate themselves on different items. These cover the factors that determine whether teamwork is successful or not. Of course, you can also use your own criteria if you have specific ones. So here, the point is to give the teacher visibility over group dynamics, to see which group is working well, which group is working less well, and to make decisions accordingly. If ever there are internal reports from students saying, yes, but I'm the only one working, or that some people aren't getting involved when they should be, and so on, the workload isn't distributed fairly. This gives the teacher visibility, a lot of information about how each group is functioning. So it's a format that's quite commonly used, especially in relation to the issue of unequal involvement in group work. And then it can be used to individualize the grade for group work if needed. Next, we can move on to self-assessment. So here it's the students who will self-assess their contribution to the group work on a project they've completed, on a skill, whatever it may be. We'll ask them to take a step back and reflect on an aspect and to self-assess. This can be based on criteria. We can also ask them for comments. We'll see that in a moment. Next, we can have them evaluate the quality of the feedback. So here, the idea is to allow students to submit an assignment and to evaluate, to give feedback on the work of others. And then the student who receives the feedback will be able to say whether this feedback was helpful or not. So the idea with this format is to value the reviewers, those who take the time to write feedback that is relevant and helps other students. Afterwards, we can use this to award extra points when good feedback is given as part of the grade, so that the final grade isn't just made up of the assignment grade, but also that it is supported by the quality of the feedback we give. And then the evaluation of the teaching. So as I explained earlier, it's the students who evaluate the course. This then allows the teacher to receive qualitative feedback. So this gives you a basic overview of the different formats we can address. It was important for me to show you this because in fact on ChallengeMe, you'll find these different formats in the form of phases. That is, you'll have phases for submitting assignments. In the studies, you submit a piece of work, phases for evaluation and evaluation phases. Within the group, also called intra-group, there are phases for authorization, feedback, evaluation, and so on, as well as for sharing the results. So in each phase, we ask participants to perform a specific action. And these phases can be tailored a bit in the way we want, depending on the use case we want to address. So we have use cases that can be directly addressed within the platform. These are available as predefined activities, as templates. So here, for example, we have group member evaluation. You will have an evaluation phase, intra-group, meaning among the group members, and a phase for sharing the results. For these formats, everything is already set up, the criteria, the suggested configuration. All you have to do is enter the participants and the desired dates for each phase. So setting up these elements can be done quite quickly. So we have templates for group member relations and for deliverable relations. Here there are three phases: submission, evaluation, and results. The evaluation of oral presentations, which is also quite commonly used. You can find these as templates, and we have many others as well. I'll let you take a look if you're interested at the details we have on challenge.me to see these different templates. That's when you want to address a use case that is directly available and ready to use in the templates. Now, you can do more advanced uses if you need to address a specific scenario. You can really create something tailor-made by selecting the phases that interest you and building the learning path that way. Desired courses. So here, for example, we start with a self-assessment phase where we then ask the student to submit an assignment. And this assignment will be evaluated by teachers, students, and professionals. So it's a co-evaluation format. We will give the results back to the student, and the student will be able to self-assess again. So there you go. That's really an example of a scenario that you could easily create manually by selecting phase by phase what interests you. That's one example. Now, what I'm going to do is present to you, and that's the purpose of this webinar, different scenarios that have been launched and that we thought would be interesting to share with you. So there will be 3 of them. We decided not to show too many because to keep it to 30 minutes, that would have been too much. But we're going to show you 3 that every single one of them takes a completely different methodology. So we'll start with the first one, which was launched by Schema with 1,309 students, a large cohort. These 1,309 students were divided into 332 teams, and there were 10 phases in total. This project lasted 3 months. So how did it go? The format of this scenario was really iterative and also somewhat a mirror format, where at first the students were asked to submit a team assignment. Then they were asked to evaluate the other groups, so the work of the other groups. Next, they were asked to evaluate themselves within their own group. So each person evaluates the members of their group on their involvement in the group work. Then they are asked to evaluate the quality of the feedback received on the evaluation of the assignments. And then they can see their results. So this format was launched over the first 6 weeks. It lasted from week 1 to week 6. And then they were asked to do exactly the same thing for week 7 to 12. So the point of this format is really to be able to adjust. That is, we have a first iteration where we go through different steps. We evaluate the work of others. We evaluate ourselves within a group. We assess the quality of the feedback. We will understand through the phase of narrowing down the results, how we can improve at every level. And so we already have concrete ways to improve in order to deliver much higher quality work in the second iteration. That's really the point. Here we find this iterative format again in this way, but it can be found in many other forms as well. We could very well do it with just a submission phase and an evaluation phase without necessarily having feedback evaluation or intragroup evaluation, just submission and evaluation result. And then we ask them for a second, improve submission. We can also do it over shorter periods. Here, it was a big project, as you can see, over 3 months with 1,300 students. But we can apply the same principle, the same benefits to smaller projects as well, to allow students to make adjustments. So what we noted regarding the learning objectives was to allow adjustment after feedback. So to develop critical thinking by discovering the work of others and through evaluation within the group. The feedback evaluation phase also helps students learn how to give constructive feedback, to provide feedback. And then it also helps to recognize individual involvement, since we have intra-group evaluation that also factors into the final grade, that adjusts the final grade to show that there is a group project grade, but there is also an individual grade, which depends on how we contributed to the group work and also on how we gave feedback. So the main benefits for the student are receiving actionable feedback before the final deliverable and practicing in every way before the graded submission. For the instructor, what's interesting is that we can track 1,309 students in this case on the platform with an automated phase system. So I'll move on to the platform in just a moment. And as I mentioned, the platform is automated to manage 1,309 students and the exchange of feedback among them. So that was the theoretical part. Now I'll be able to show you how it looks on the platform. All right then. The idea of showing you the platform is simply to give you a bit of an overview of how it works. In this context, in this type of format, these formats are more complex than the standard ones, but that's also the purpose of this webinar, to show you that we can work with very specific formats and go further if you need to create truly specialized educational scenarios. If you're really interested in the details, how the features work technically, how to create this or that type of phase, how to link them together and so on, we have a webinar next week, if I'm not mistaken, which we've called the Expert Workshop, where we really show you the details of the configuration. We go further than a simple presentation. We really go into detail about how to configure each element and so on. So here, I'm just going to show you the principle so you can understand, okay, in a format like this, how we go about configuring it. And then afterwards, if you're interested in the details, how to configure each specific element. Don't hesitate to sign up for next week's webinar. So just for those who aren't familiar, ChallengeMe, the principle of creating a challenge. Here, I'm in the challenge setup. There are different steps: general information, scheduling, instructions, participants, and criteria. and the assignment of evaluators. So as a result, we'll configure our elements in each tab. So here I'm in the tab, scheduling, and actually we can see the different phases that have been set up here. So I'll go over them in detail for you. So we have the submission phase here where students were able to submit their group work. Each of the teams, 300 teams were able to submit their work as a group there. So at that point, only one student per group is needed to submit the work for the whole group. Next, we have the blue phase where students were able to evaluate other groups. At the same time, we see there's the purple phase where students could evaluate themselves within their own group. Each phase color corresponds to a type of phase. Here, blue is for the evaluation of work and purple is for evaluation within the group. Then in yellow, it's the evaluation of feedback. Here, students come to see the feedback they've received and evaluate that feedback. And then the red phase is the presentation of the results. And then we see that we have exactly the same thing. So this mirror concept, we will again have a submission phase, an evaluation phase, evaluation of work, group evaluation, evaluation of feedback, and results. So the idea is that we have a start date and an end date for each phase. And so during these periods, participants can take part in that phase and do what is asked of them. This glove-shaped visual is intentional precisely to manage this scenario process, which usually unfolds over a fairly long period, especially when dealing with advanced educational scenarios. Then, as I mentioned, when we're dealing with standard formats, it can even be done synchronously or over 1 or 2 weeks. It's entirely feasible as well. And then we'll be able to set instructions, participants, and so on. I'll show you maybe just what it looks like from the participant side so you can get a sense of what the student saw at that moment. I'm going to the tab, preview. It might be quite interesting for you to see exactly what a typical student actually saw during their daily experience. I'm checking, it's a pretty heavy change, so the loading is taking a bit of time. I'll come back to it in just a moment. If it takes too long, I'll show you another use case in the meantime, so you don't have to wait. And then I'll come back right after. The first use case was with the iterative evaluation scheme. Now, this is another use case that was initiated by Centrale Supélec. And the idea is to have a logbook where the teacher can provide feedback. So unlike the first scenario I showed you, which was about peer assessment, here we're stepping a bit outside the framework of peer assessment. We're going to have a scenario where the student can self-assess on certain skills, and then they will keep a logbook that they can submit at different deadlines, and at each deadline they will receive feedback from the teacher. There is no grading involved. It's just feedback that the teacher provides regularly on this logbook based on what is being asked of them. With this format, we asked students to explain how they perceived the skills they had to self-assess, the actions they would take to develop that skill, and then the evidence they plan to provide to demonstrate their development, to prove that they had acquired the skill. So we are really working within the framework of a competency-based approach. And so the logbook was something they kept and could submit at different times. What's interesting is that we also see 3 checkpoints that mark the student's progress along the way. These are meant to allow the student to step back and reflect on their skill acquisition. So the logbook was really there to explain the process. And the checkpoint is more about saying, okay, at this stage, where am I at in terms of acquiring this skill? And so I can self-assess. And the teacher, though it's not specified here, could also give feedback on the student's self-assessment. So this is a format that's being talked about. More and more, the idea of having regular feedback from the teacher. It can also be feedback generated by AI. It can be peer feedback in any case, feedback in all its forms, given regularly to a student on a deliverable that they will improve. Here, it's a logbook, but it could be any other element that they will iterate on to improve. In terms of learning objectives, it was about developing reflexivity on skills through self-assessment, supporting progress with continuous teacher feedback, and making the learning process visible. It's true that it's interesting because we'll be able to see the evolution of this logbook through the different entries. We'll keep the history, different phases where we'll see the record of changes. And it's true that for traceability, it's always interesting to see the progression. How the student took the feedback into account and improved. And it also helps to train in self-disclosure. In terms of benefits, students receive regular feedback over 4 months and ongoing monitoring. At the end, teachers review 10 individual learning paths. So here we're really dealing with a different approach. Previously, we were dealing with managing large cohorts. Here, in this scenario, we're following 10 students over. So it's really about close monitoring. At the end, these students are supervised by, I believe there are 2 teachers on this project. And in total, there were 24 phases orchestrated in this project. So we'll see how it works on ChallengeMe with the different phases. And afterwards, I'll show you what it looks like from the participant side for the previous use case we looked at. All right, so as you can see here, we were on this specific one. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone right now. So here we are. This is the central Supilec framework I just mentioned to you. As you can see, we'll start with a self-assessment of skills. Here, it's the student who will self-assess their skills. They will receive feedback from instructors on this self-assessment. So we have a system that links the different phases together. In this feedback phase, what exactly are we giving feedback on? Well, we're going to make a connection. This phase is linked to the self-assessment phase to specify that the feedback is given on this stage about the progression, a small technical detail. Next, we have the logbook, the first entry on which the student will be able to receive feedback from the teacher. So it says progression, but it was only feedback. Then we have the second entry for feedback, the third entry for feedback, the fourth entry for feedback, and so on. So really, it's done iteratively like this. And as a result, the student knows that at certain times they will have to submit a version of their logbook on which they will receive feedback. Next, we have the midterm self-assessment. This is a phase in its own right. And then we start again with more iterations. And at the end, there is a final submission, so the final version on which they will receive feedback again. So here, this is to show you a bit of the format we use for the logbook, where feedback is received regularly. Afterwards, if we wanted to change a scenario, we could absolutely add a phase. So I'll show you a bit of the technical side. How do we create a scenario like this? Then we choose the phase we're interested in, and we can continue the scenario if needed. I'll show you. So for this one, there should be fewer students, so it should be better. And then I'll show you how it works with another scenario. I'll show you the student view right after. It'll be simpler. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and present the very last scenario to you now, if you're ready. So to recap, we saw the first scenario with the diagram where we're dealing with managing a large cohort, 1,300 students with an iterative format. So 2 really distinct blocks with, if I go back, the first block and then the second block. Next, we saw Centrale Supelec, where there's regular feedback on a logbook that the student keeps improving. And now we have a format with the University of Poitiers, which was implemented for 344 students. There were also 57 teachers involved in this project who came to evaluate. We'll look at the details. And there were 15 phases in total, which took place over 6 months. The idea behind this format is to have a continuous project with progressive deliverables. Whereas in the previous scenario, we had a deliverable that we kept improving. In this case, the deliverables are different, but they are connected to each other since they are the various deliverables of a project that we will ask them to complete. How did it go with this scenario? In the first semester, we asked your students to submit various deliverables, such as project charters and specifications documents. These different deliverables were evaluated by teachers. That's why there are 57 of them to distribute the workload among the 344 students. Then the group work was evaluated as well. So it was assessed both by asking students to evaluate each other within their group and by the teachers based on the visibility they had. This allows for a dual perspective, how the students evaluated each other within the group, and also the teacher's perception of the group's performance, of how they work together. And then in the second semester, we have it again. Another deliverable is the progress report, the project assessment, which is evaluated by the teachers. And then at the end, there is an oral defense evaluated by a jury. So all of this is part of ChallengeMe. There is nothing else done outside of ChallengeMe to show that everything can really be done within ChallengeMe, whether it's submitting the different deliverables, evaluation by teachers, intra-group evaluation, presentation of results, and also the evaluation of the oral defense by a jury. Afterwards, it's just a matter of configuration, but all of this is possible. In terms of educational objectives, the realization of a complex project was structured by requiring different deliverables as the project progressed so that they could be easily evaluated, at least in terms of management, by 57 teachers who were professionalized through the process. So here, we're more focused on the activity format, the scenario itself, supporting progress through continuous feedback, and highlighting individual involvement through changes between groups. And evaluation by the teacher is based on the group's performance. In terms of benefits for students, it's about receiving feedback from teachers on each deliverable. For teachers, the workload is staggered, meaning that each teacher will have a workload that is distributed fairly among all teachers. This makes it easy to manage large cohorts. And then the platform will allow you to manage all of this in a very clear and straightforward way. I'll proceed forward to the challenge, or at this very moment. I see that there are quite a few questions coming in. I will be sure to answer all of them right after this, so that you can finish up this specific use case first. So don't worry, I will answer your questions. So as it turns out, this specific one right here was the actual case that came from Poitiers. And I'm going to show you how it was carried out. So it's always the same principle. We have different phases. And for each phase, we've registered the right participants. We've set the criteria we wanted and so on. So in a format like this, there's a phase for submitting deliverable number 1. So the students submit their first deliverable. We have the 344 students who are registered. You can see them here. Next, in phase 2, we have the evaluation of the work by the teachers. So there are 57 registered teachers who come to evaluate this deliverable. Then we have the second deliverable, same principle. The 57 teachers come to evaluate the deliverable. Deliverable 3, again, evaluated by the teachers. Here we have the intra-group evaluation, which we mentioned earlier, the evaluation that is done within the group, and the teachers who also come to analyze the group's work during this phase. So these are two phases that measure the group's performance. We have the results that are provided by the phase shown in red. And again, there's another deliverable that's required for which it will receive an evaluation, and then little by little until the end. So we can see that this is a project that isn't finished yet. It's ongoing. We're at this stage now, and there's not much left to complete it. And with the oral defenses at the end by the jury. So that's it for this format, just to show you a bit how it works. I'll try to show you just the student view, because it might be interesting for you to see what it looks like. Before we move forward, I just really need to double check and make sure that there isn't any sensitive personal data being displayed here. I think I'll go ahead and use this specific one right now. Right now, I'm just generating the student view, and I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. I will go ahead and put it first for you. My computer is experiencing some performance issues, but everything will be resolved shortly. So I'll be able to show you that. So here I'm giving you a preview from the student side, but for the project, the one from the University of Poitiers, for example. So this is really what a student will be able to see. That is to say, this is as if the challenge hasn't started yet. I made a view as if the challenge hadn't started, but then once it does, the student can click on each of the phases. So basically, they'll see all the steps they can go through. So the submission of deliverable number 1, deliverable number 2, deliverable number 3. They don't see the evolution phases since the student isn't enrolled in those phases. So they really only see what concerns them. And during the open dates, they'll be able to click on it and submit their work. Next, the arrival of group members, the results from the first semester to see their grades, and again, the other submissions that are required of them. So participants only see the phases in which they are enrolled, obviously. And for them, it's very clear. For each item they need to act on, once it's active, they can click on it and participate. So that's it for the different scenarios I wanted to present to you today. I think we've reached the end of the half hour. So I'll let you ask questions if you have any. I see there are already some. What does a logbook contain in this example? So here we're referring to the challenge of, I'll go back to the slide, that way it will also illustrate the question. The challenge that was launched by Centrale Supélec. So if I'm not mistaken, what we were asking the students here was to indicate in the logbook where they were in terms of developing the skill. So to do that, we asked them first how well they managed to understand and analyze what was being asked of them in terms of what the skill really meant, to see if they had understood it properly. Next, what actions they plan to take to develop this skill, or which ones they had already implemented. And then what evidence they intended to provide to demonstrate their acquisition of this skill. And the fact of formulating these different elements allowed the teacher to then give feedback to say, in relation to what you're describing in this logbook, maybe the actions you plan to take aren't necessarily the most suitable for that particular skill. On the other hand, maybe you could further develop this type of action. As for the evidence you plan to provide, it's either a good idea or not, or here's how you could develop it. Really provide feedback on these different elements to help the student understand how to demonstrate that they have acquired a particular skill. We're going to try to work on the project since it's still ongoing. See if we can do a little feedback session on these formats to also get the teacher's perspective, because I'm showing you formats that have been launched, but what could also be interesting is to get feedback from the teachers as well. So maybe we'll organize formats like that. So that was about the first question. Then there was another one, which I think concerns the participants. Can we add participants from outside the university? If, for example, I want to include students and teachers from another school for joint projects, then technically, yes, we can absolutely do that. That is generally, you will be integrated with an LMS like Moodle. So you can launch a challenge directly from Moodle via the activity selector. So that means access is through the Moodle course for everyone who has Moodle access. In the course in question, they click on the activity and arrive at ChallengeMe. If you need to include other participants, actually, we can give them separate access via login. Password, so for those who are not part of your organization, we can absolutely provide access via login and password if needed. And afterwards, if it's between schools, we can do that as well. Now, if it's two different Moodles, that's a bit more technical. To provide access from two Moodles to the same challenge, I'd need to double check, but in any case, yes. These are formats we can look into to address if there is ever a request for it. So technically, yes, these are things we can absolutely handle. I don't know if you have a project of this kind. And then depending on the setup, we can look at which configuration is the most suitable. During the stages where there is no peer review, can we make the work visible to peers? So if I understand correctly, there is no peer review, so it's just a simple submission. Or without evaluation, can we make the work visible to peers? Oh yes, simply for them. So if that's the question, I'm not sure if that's it and if it wasn't specified. Otherwise, if it's just to allow students to see each other's work without evaluating, we can absolutely set up an evaluation phase where we simply ask them to give, for example, just some feedback, or not even that. They're not even required to complete the phase, but in any case, this way they'll be able to see each other's work. We can absolutely configure it that way. The goal is simply to show other students the work that has been done by their peers. At that point, I would maybe just recommend giving a little feedback to allow the student to acknowledge that they've seen the work. At most, leave a short comment if needed, but yes, that's definitely a format we can accommodate. Just to confirm, during peer review, other students' work cannot be downloaded. However, if a student has to evaluate 3 assignments, for example, they will actually have a download link. So they will be able to download other students' work. If it's a PDF, it will be integrated directly, but that won't prevent it from being downloaded if needed. But it will be integrated directly into the browser. Similarly, if it's an MP4 video, it will be integrated directly into the browser. Afterwards, you can restrict the types of files you want. If you only want PDF or MP4, etc., that can be set in the options. Are there any others? I hope I answered your questions correctly. If anyone else has questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or turn on your microphone. I see there are no more questions. In any case, thank you for your attention. I'll send you a quick message with the link to the replay in case you want to share it as well. This is the first time we're doing this format where we present a few different scenarios that we think are interesting to share. Feel free to give us your feedback on this format as well. We're always open to it, whether it's about how we present the scenarios or the information we provide. We're always eager for your feedback so we can create presentations that best meet your expectations. Thank you all. I wish you a wonderful day and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good day.